Welcome, listeners. This is the Moonbase Podcast, episode 14, and today we'll have on IamShamtheMan and a bit of his background here. He's a bachelor in political science with honors from Oregon State University, an athlete. He's wrestled for 1 year of the best college teams, and he's also a former amateur MMA champ. He's a licensed engineer. He completed a 5-year apprenticeship through the IBEW union. And yeah, that's just some context for you guys on what he's done before. And now he's urban exploring, he's vagabonding, and we're going to get into some of that in this episode. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. Hey there, podcast listeners. Are you ready to take on a challenge that's hotter than a summer heat wave? Well, get ready to dive headfirst into the scalding sensation of the Hot Kettle Challenge. That's right, folks. We're turning the ice-cold Ice Bucket Challenge on its head to raise money for a cause that's just as important. Introducing the Hot Kettle Challenge, where you pour steaming hot water over yourself to support heat stroke survivors. Now you might be thinking, but isn't that just a recipe for disaster? Well, yes, but it's all in good fun and for a great cause. Here's how it works. Step 1. Fill up your kettle with boiling water. The hotter, the better. Gather your friends, family, and anyone else brave enough to take on the challenge. Trust us, it's more fun with the crowd. Hold that kettle high, aim, and pour that scalding hot water over your head with a smile. Like it's a personal sauna right in your kitchen. But remember, safety first. Be sure to wear your oven mitts and protective eyewear while you're at it. We don't want any burns, just a good, steamy time. And here's the best part. Every time you scold yourself for a good cause, you'll be helping heat stroke survivors by raising funds for their recovery and support. It's a win-win, really. So get ready to turn up the heat and make a splash in the most unconventional way possible. Join the Hot Kettle Challenge today, because sometimes the best way to beat the heat is to embrace it. And remember, folks, stay safe, stay hydrated, and always have a cold glass of water nearby. Now, back to our regular scheduled programming, where we promise not to scold you with any more wild ideas. Hey, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you on. I see from your Reddit posts you live quite the exciting life. So it'd be great if you could tell us a bit about that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it's funny because my buddy told me about Reddit like 2 years ago, and I was really resistant. Like, I was resistant to all social media. So me being online is like a total 180. And so I started with like YouTube. That was basic. I was convinced to do TikTok, even though I'm like, okay, this is like a vanity thing, but hey, you can use it for your own purposes. Moved to Instagram, and then I finally was like, okay, I'm going to do Reddit. And for me, I would say Reddit's probably the best overall experience, just because you get to actually connect directly with people who are like you and go back and forth. And there's, for me, I call it like the ultimate brainstorming tool. So where this started was, I think a lot of people can relate to this in terms of vagabond, homeless communities. There's trauma, and specifically childhood trauma. And I've kind of been bottling this stuff in throughout my life. And then a couple of years ago, I had a few surgeries because I wrestled in college. I've got a bachelor's degree. I'm a licensed electrician, did a 5-year union program. So I have all these, accomplishments, but I still felt empty because I had no kind of like relationship connection to anything. And I'd been watching people do train hopping, and then abandoned buildings kind of got suggested, and I'm thinking, one day I'm going to do that. But I'd been an addict at that point, drinking a lot, kind of watching videos in a dark living room type of deal. And my buddy in Jacksonville was like, hey, you're going to be out for a year with an injury, come move here. So I moved to Jacksonville and spent most of 2021 there, and I would venture out and do road trips. And this is after I was treated for mental health. And that's just a piece of advice for a lot of biggest things to address your mental health. get on meds if necessary, which I am. And it opened up the entire world. So I'm telling you, it's a complete change. I'm totally different. I felt like I was hiding this part of me, and I was finally able to expose it after that. Traveled the country, and then my final trip out, and this is officially when I became homeless, which is going to come up on 2 years now, October 10th, 2021. I did my last venture, which was going to be a move from Jacksonville, Florida to Las Vegas, Nevada, and I was going to restart my life there. But I decided to do a detour to Detroit because I've been across the country 6 times here in 2021, and I kind of got a sense of where I wanted to see more of, and that's the mecca of abandoned buildings. I was going to go there, film some stuff, do my thing, and then eventually zigzag through the country as I saw fit. When I got to Detroit about a month later, actually exactly a month later, the number 10 plays a theme. November 10th, my car broke down, and I was in a weird spot. I was just so into my head, and was so wanting to film this stuff, but financial situations didn't allow for it. So basically, I was, stuck there. I became homeless, and I lived in a parking garage. I lived on top of an abandoned hospital. I just kind of made do, but as you know, you're up in Canada, so you understand like tough winter and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So finally, my buddy was like, "Hey, yeah, exactly." So you understand how crazy it is, but it's a good learning experience anyway. It's like my buddy on January 10th finally was like, "Hey, man, I'm going to fly you to Las Vegas. This is insanity. It's always good to have somebody to check you. In this life, there's a lot of solitude, and again, getting into your own head." You might make choices that are not the best, but in the moment you're thinking, yeah, this is the right thing, but you're forcing things too much. But anyways, he took me to Las Vegas, through flight. And the first night, I got all my shit stolen. So that was a big reminder, and here I am, just with the clothes on my back, my wallet had gotten stolen, I just had my phone with me. And I rebuilt back from that, and I'm like, okay, 2022, this is going to be the year. I'm going to rebuild back into being an electrician and go back to the society. But for whatever reason, again, I think mental health plays into it, and just kind of being on your own, not having a real support network. I just ended up not really doing much. And then on October 10th, early October 6th of 2022, I went to Chicago because coincidentally, this is wild, but earlier that year on Reddit, through the homeless subreddit, somebody reached out. It ended up being, a younger woman, and she was alone as well over in San Diego, and she was struggling to kind of make things neat. And she ended up being a foster kid. She aged out of the system, so abandoned at 5 years old, aged out at 18, had nobody. She was deaf. She'd had cancer before. She had health issues. She had like a permanent catheter installed because of all the various hospital visits and stuff needed. But this person really struggling, and they were super positive, and I think that's ultimately what also influenced my whole attitude and approach to the lifestyle, is seeing somebody that was so down and out, somebody who needed the ultimate help, who had every excuse to be pissed off and whatever, but they were just absolutely positive, never bitched or moaned or anything like that. And I would help them online, figure stuff out in terms of, sleeping locations or how to get access to food banks and how ultimately maybe to get a better, because they've been discriminated against, from being deaf and alone, and it's hard to stand up for yourself, especially if you're, a younger woman who doesn't have access to anything.
Yeah.
So, the very tough thing is around mid-April, and it just makes me sick to say this, she found this job in a really rural area of San Diego picking avocados. Again, no complaint. This person's freaking going out there doing some hard work in the sun.
And is that is that like cash work, like the migrant, like seasonal work?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So even though she was born here, and yeah, it was exactly essentially like this migrant work, and that's all she could get because Walmart, for whatever reason, when she had been in Chicago, which she was born and raised in, she went to San Diego to try to find her birth mother, and when she met her, it was just a complete disaster. and you could tell this person is just completely evil. And then, Rachel, that's her name, was back on the streets in San Diego. But she'd been working at Walmart, and they just kept cut her hours and stuff like that. And again, there's a lot of discrimination, and that's something I want to point out, especially in this lifestyle. When you're lonely and out, there's a lot of people that can kind of sense that and maybe take advantage. But that's what she found. So she's coming back home, car breaks down, Stonewall area, and she told me, "Hey, Sham, I'm stuck here, just kind of want to let you know I'm going to try to sleep behind this abandoned building. I feel safe." Well, I didn't hear from her for 2 days, and I'm starting to fear the worst. And all of a sudden I get a text from her saying, "Sham, something really bad happened." And I tried to ask what happened. She's like, "I have to go to the police." So she goes there, and I hear from her a little bit later, but she doesn't admit anything. She's like, "I have to go to the hospital," and whatever. But I eventually found out, again, this is sick and evil, and these people should be killed. But she was raped by 2 men. And we're talking about a 20-year-old deaf girl who has health issues.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And the kind of even insult to injury, in a sense, is she found out she had terminal cancer. So that's to find out you have terminal cancer in and of itself is already horrible. But to find out in this instance at 20 years old, for me, she's always going to be an inspiration, and that's something that makes me move forward. And as I kind of reach out and do more media opportunities, again, thank you for appreciate reaching out. And this is something I'm going to keep reaching out in as I develop myself. But it's something that I want to kind of figure out the truth behind and whatnot. So anyways, we ended up losing contact when I later found out that she was transferred to Chicago several months later, that this nurse I'd been in contact with who had taken her phone never gave her phone back. And this is just a very weird scenario because I was supposed to sign some documents saying that I'm like a legal guardian, meaning I can make decisions on Rachel's behalf because that's what she had granted me. And as we're getting ready to sign these documents, I just get radio silence. So we don't hear from each other, and I keep trying the number, nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, in September of 2022, I get through, and this woman answers. I'm like, "This is Sham, where's Rachel?" And she's like, "Oh my God, Rachel's been looking for you. I'm her new caseworker. She got moved from San Diego to Chicago. California did just a bunch of weird things, and, they sent her and whatever." And I told her about the situation. And she's like, "Yeah, Rachel's excited to hear from you." So finally got back in contact with Rachel, and that's when she said that her phone was taken. And not only was her phone taken, but her Reddit account was shut. Her Gmail was shut down. Literally every single way of me possibly reaching her had been shut down. My theory is, she's basically kind of like garbage in the system. And me, I'm like basically a potential disruption. You know what I mean? Because it's like this person doesn't have anybody. They have terminal cancer. Just freaking run them through. They're going to be dead. Whatever. We don't need some dude to come stand up for her, right? That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So we go through that. We get in contact, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to fly down and see her. So I fly down from Vegas to Chicago, October 6th, 2022. I get there. I'm talking with the caseworker, and she's like, "Yeah, because of COVID, we're not supposed, there's supposed to be some sort of 2-week rule and whatnot." But she's like, "I'm going to talk to my supervisor, the director, and see if we can get you in." That was the last I heard of her. So this case manager just disappeared, and I was talking to Rachel, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm trying to talk to her. She's not in sick. I have this other person." And I'm like, "Where are you at?" And these people in some hospital in Illinois, in Chicago, wouldn't give her any information. She's like, "All I can see is state of Illinois badges or whatever." Because being a foster child, you're still kind of like a ward of the state up to a certain point. So they have a lot of control over that. But it was really weird because they just wouldn't give her any information. And it got to a point where like when you have terminal cancer or illness, all they really do is inject you with painkillers. They're like, you're going to die, so let's just inject you with painkillers. So if you have something like a runny nose, what they were doing to her, they were not even giving her tissues. So here she is with like a raw nose and whatever, and it's just horrible. And the thing is, they can do something more. And this again points for me to like a sinister aspect of when you're alone and you're dying and you don't have anybody, the system is just going to try to take you out as much as possible. And again, for me, I'm just a distraction. I'm just a barrier. Why the hell are you involving this random dude off the internet? And again, I ended up just losing contact in late October. So since then, haven't been able to reach her, and that's just like a big part of my journey as well, as I was trying to figure out what happened, and I just haven't found answers. So as I continue the journey and, get more and more into media, I'm always going to mention her, because who knows, somebody might have information. And that was also part of my story. Belt Magazine, this journalist from NYU, reached out, and she wrote this extensive story about me, and she also mentioned Rachel as well, so that was a big theme there. So if anybody wants to see it again, if you want to Google Sham, S-H-A-M, Belt Magazine, you can see the article there to kind of get a better background. So I spent the winter in Chicago, super brutal, got down to like negative 40. There was some sort of record said negative 40, and I ended up riding the freight train. I rode the public transit train.
That's negative 40 Fahrenheit?
Yeah, Fahrenheit, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That was, one night was just, it was wild. And Chicago is one of the most dangerous cities. It's just chaos. But I kind of just persisted there, again, because of Rachel. But after a while, same thing that happened in Detroit. You get disillusioned. You just end up getting in your head. And you spend way too much time in a spot that is not going to do anything for you. So finally, it was mid-April. And it's weird, because I believe that a lot of stuff happens for a reason, and you kind of see things unfold and manifest themselves, especially through a journey. But I remember how I got into everything by watching Train Hopping. Stove the Hobo
yeah, shout out Stove.
Watching his channel.
What a legend.
Oh, yeah, the guy, yeah, he's absolutely a legend. So I'm glad that he was my intro to train hopping, because it was just an amazing vibe, and he was just the right guy to do it. So it was weird, because train hopping got me into abandoned buildings. It was a YouTube suggestion. I'd done it in reverse. It made sense, because road tripping and abandoned buildings are a perfect match. Well, here I am without a car in Chicago, referencing the High Line, the BNSF High Line, which is a Chicago to Seattle or Chicago to Portland route. I'm like, this is the perfect opportunity. So I started, doing my research and whatnot, and mid-April, I finally caught a train after, like a week of camping out. And that's part of the process, I think, that people miss out on. Is the major thing is the planning and the waiting and the stuff like that. Getting onto a freight train, like just riding on a freight train, there's nothing to it. Like, you're just sitting there. So the exciting part is getting the Bofang U5, I forget what it's called, but it's like a $20 radio, and you're able to listen into all the conversations. You're teaching yourself, you're learning the terms. You're scouting things out, you're camping there, you see trains, you get kind of a, knowledge of how things flow. For me, that's the exciting part. So finally, was able to hop on, and then I rode 60 hours here to Seattle. It went as perfect as possible. I got to see Glacier National Park, one of the most scenic areas during the day. And then I get to Seattle. The reason I came here is because I have a buddy who's been telling me, hey, man, come down. I've got a farm. You can do, I need to have an electrical project done. Being a licensed electrician, I'm like, this is perfect, especially being able to just do my own thing and chill. So that's ultimately why I chose Seattle. But at the same time, it's like it worked perfectly, because the BNSF High Line I was able to complete. So I'm like, if I'm going to die, at least I accomplished that. If this is the one and only thing I've done train hopping, at the very least, I feel like I got good experience. And that makes me, more relaxed because I got to do things that I never really thought I would do because I would die from addiction and I would just continue to remain a hermit. And so that's the big aspects of me being a vagabond and exploring is meshing all these different things I've seen through various influencers, from the urban camping, stealth camping, road tripping, abandoned buildings, train hopping. I'm basically trying to do all these diverse, unconventional things that I'm taking from all these different people that I used to watch.
Okay.
So I've been in Seattle since mid-April. Yeah, so I've been in Seattle since mid-April, doing temp work, just kind of living and subsisting. I've got so much media stored on my phone, and we're talking about almost 200 gigabytes, and I can just do this indefinitely. So I'm focused on doing that, and kind of my next plan, again, another unfortunate terminal cancer type of deal is my buddy, my best friend, his mom was diagnosed. So once I get the phone call, I'm going to go back to Oregon, where I'm from. I'm from Corvallis, Oregon. So I'm going to return to my hometown, which is kind of awkward because that's where my parent, family stuff is, and I haven't been in contact with them for a couple of years because I just got tired of, the way they're, the mental health issues they've got and just all the trauma and abuse and stuff like that. So I'm basically just waiting for a phone call pretty soon, and then I'll go to Oregon, and then from there, continue my journey. That's kind of just a rough, long kind of overview.
No, that was great. I actually have a bunch of questions to ask you just based off that. And one thing I just want to mention before any of that is that I'm fully uh, on board for figuring out what's going on with Rachel and what happened with that. And if you ever need anything or want me to shout anything out, yeah, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to help.
I really appreciate it, especially because she was part of the Reddit community. I think her tag was like surviving 75 or something like that. But definitely, that's one reason I mentioned it. I appreciate it. I'll definitely keep you updated. And hopefully anybody who hears this, her name is Rachel Scott, 20 years old, from Chicago. She lived in San Diego, worked at Walmart's there, and that's the info I guess we can give and see what happens, but thank you.
Yeah, it just sounds terrible what happened there. It's sad to see how the system fails people like that. Especially when it's made, or it appears to be made to be like a crutch, but then as soon as you try and lean on that crutch, it just falls all apart on you.
Exactly. For me, it was the biggest exposing factor. I'm a political science major, and I got into it because growing up, I was really into conspiracy theories, which for me is actually a truth theory, because they provide much more background than any official story is giving. Official stories are very bland, superficial, but these guys are doing investigative journalism. And not everything is going to be on point, but it's more likely than not they're more believable. So coming from that background and seeing what transpired with Rachel gave validity to, some sinister aspects, because these are the people that were advertised to believe need the most help. If you mention this person to whatever, to society in general, like, we are made to help this person. This person is doing all the right things. They're alone. They're struggling. We need to help this person. And just another thing I want to mention, even just kind of this hypocrisy or whatever, or exposing the system. San Diego, the newspaper there, I believe it was the LA Times, did a newspaper about San Diego homelessness. And they mentioned this caseworker, and they mentioned this program called PATH, and how they were helping people get housing and stuff. The funny thing is they're talking about these people in their 50s. Yes, they deserve housing, but these people are much further along in life. They don't have, eliminating circumstances like Rachel did, and they're like, this is a great success, we're helping these people and whatever. Guess what? Rachel was in that same program. She probably knew that exact same case manager. Where were they to help her? And she's been telling me all along how people had just disregarded her. And in my opinion, it goes back to this person is garbage. What future does Rachel have? What is she going to offer us? So I'm always going to believe till the day I die that there was some just very dark elements, because there's no excuse for not helping somebody who is in a bad situation but is making the most of it and who is positive the entire time, not complain. When she got terminal cancer diagnosis, she asked me how I was doing. She's like, Sham, do you need money? I'm like, how much purer can a person get? Like, if people don't recognize that, the people in the system are completely evil, and that's the proof.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It sounds a lot like if you're not complacent enough and meant to be a cog in the system, that they'd like you to be eliminated.
Absolutely. Perfectly said, man.
Yeah, that's a real shame. And I feel like a lot of people in the vagabonding community go through that in various degrees. Obviously, most aren't nearly as in rough of a situation as Rachel, and it'd be amazing if the podcast helps at all for getting the word out there, and if we can get some more info on her, and what if we could help out in any way, that'd be awesome.
For sure. I'll keep everybody updated.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I wanted to ask you about train hopping. So the first time you hopped on, were you just going solo, or did you have someone that's already done it that had the experience that you followed, or was it just you did your research, you followed the radios? I think it's like UVF or something like that, right? It's like a handheld radio, like.
Yeah, it's like $20 to $30 on Amazon. It's UV. I think UV5R. Bofang UV5R is what's universally used. You can obviously use a ton of stuff, but that's like the most economical because it's $20 and it does the job. There's also apps on the phone that work great as well. So there's scanner apps, and essentially what you do is you go on Google and you research railroad frequencies in whatever area you're at. You type that in, and now you're tapped into the system. So to answer your question, I've been solo this entire time. The only time I wasn't was recently when I took this couple that actually coincidentally reached out through Reddit, through the Vagabond subreddit, and they were in Portland, and they say, hey, if we come to Seattle, can we do a train hop? And I'm like, you know what? That's an awesome idea. I get to experience something with somebody. Plus, I get to see a stretch, hopefully, that I haven't during the daylight. Because when I went from Spokane to Seattle, Eastern Washington was dark. And that's an area I really wanted to see because despite going through 40 states, road tripping, and being a Northwest kid, Corvallis, Oregon, Eastern Washington had eluded me for whatever reason. And this killed a bunch of birds at one time with a stone. So to go back to kind of the origination, I had watched freaking dozens upon dozens of hours of train hopping and abandoned buildings. That was in my gradual process. Watch a ton of stuff, do your own research, and then go out and live it.
Okay.
The way I kind of figured things out, it's funny because the most basic thing you want to do is you want to YouTube a route that you're interested in. For example, you want to go Chicago to Seattle, train hop. See what comes up online, see what comes up on YouTube. Well, guess what? It never came up. Not to say that people have not done it, but that's referencing the difficulty. And come to find out, Chicago, it is a train hub of North America. Also, it's a very tough spot to hop out of, from what I've heard. But that got me excited because here's a challenge. Here's something to kind of show that might be out of the norm.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
what I do is you go to Google Maps in whatever location you're at, and you type in railroad. Now you know which railroads are operating in your location. So you're limited, obviously, by what's available. I see BNSF. Okay, BNSF High Line, I research it. It is a Seattle or Portland to Chicago route. Perfect. I'm in Chicago. And I have to go to a BNSF yard, right? What's going to take me there? It's going to be an intermodal unit. So railroad, intermodal, BNSF. Boom. I find a couple train yards. By going into Google and researching, by going into BNSF or any other railroad webpage, you can glean a lot of information. This is where tech savvy comes into account. But we also have online groups like, Vagabond Community and whatnot. Rail fanning is another good, resource access. Although a lot of them are anti-train hopping. They're kind of like way too good at two shoes and they might report you, but you can, by just remaining anonymous and kind of getting information you can. But ultimately, you're going to be going to train yards. If you don't know a specific one, that means that you're going to have to spend time at each one listening in on the radio. And what you're listening for is you're listening for a destination point. And you're also listening for the train engine numbers. So each engine has a 4-digit number attached to it. You're listening there, let's say they say 1, 2, 3, 4, Seattle. You're in Chicago. You're like, awesome, I'm going to be looking for this. But once you get on, you're pretty much assured you're going to get there. But I always warn people that this is a risk. You have to be prepped for wherever this train takes you. The good thing with intermodals is that you're at least going to be going to destinations which have regular trains coming through. These are high priority trains, and they're very scheduled. They're going to stop at each spot every single day, which is nice because if you want to explore, let's say Whitefish, Montana, you can get off there, spend X number of days exploring, come back any day, and you know that the train is going to come through. That's ultimately going to take you to whatever destination down.
So was your first ride an intermodal?
That's really, yeah. So for me, I would just prefer to ride intermodals because I want to get there quick, and it's a comfortable ride with all the space in those wells. And also, I don't know if the official term is a porch, but to have these nice graded areas where you can sit and kind of observe the scenery is real nice. Sorry to cut you off. What were you asking?
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I was just asking about like if the intermodal was the first ride you took, yeah. But you answered that.
Yeah, and the cool thing with intermodals, it's a very documented record. So if you go on any railway website, they will have every single intermodal route sketched out. And so that's a very good thing. As opposed to other types of trains who might get stranded or broken up somewhere, there's not as much information about that. But with intermodals, they're dealing with these huge shipping companies who need to have, there just has to be more detailed information as to that. You're dealing with big-time customers, so they need to be able to see this network, this map. Sorry, drinking some soda, so I'm going to have some burps. But
Oh, no worries.
anyways, yeah, they're going to have to be very detailed. They're giving this information to very high, end customers. And that's another thing that plays to our advantage in terms of train hopping or vagabonds. It's much easier to get info on intermodals and to just go that way. Although I've heard from Hobo Shoestring is another big guy. He might be the biggest one currently. He was talking about the different kind of trains you can hop, box cars, general manifest, grainers, intermodals. And he said the intermodals are more likely to be searched, which makes sense. But as of now, thankfully, I have not come across any trouble at all as well. But that's something to keep an eye out for, which there's another kind of segue into how you want to deal with observation. I got myself a pair of binoculars, compact. You don't have to have anything crazy or special. But I kind of look ahead. Whenever I'm going into a yard, I'm very cognizant about who might be around, so I'm staying low. But I'm also scanning, where things might come. I'm looking for kind of official-looking vehicles. They might be bulls, railway police. But anytime a train is slowing down, stopping, you want to be very aware of what's going on forward, and you want to be ready to jump out the side, which is most hidden and secure, that maybe has some bushes that you can dive in and get away from. Because the thing is, people kind of freeze up whenever there's authority involved in anything. Fact of the matter is, if you get out of the jurisdiction, they can't do anything. So instead of freezing up, you have to be thinking, listen, I'm going to run for the fences, I'm going to get off the property, and then screw you guys, and that's about it. So don't be complacent, like that's the word you mentioned, good word. You have to understand that what you are doing is already illegal. You have to accept that. And I'm not going to encourage anybody to this, but we have to say this is absolutely illegal. You're already breaking the laws. Why do you want to hang around? So just get off the property and then figure shit out from there.
Okay. I think that's some pretty solid advice. Um, so so without running into any other train hoppers or such, so you wouldn't happen to know anything about the crew change manual?
So for me, I'm not aware of that, but there's scheduled stops. So for example, between Chicago and Seattle, there might be, let's say, 8 stops, okay? You're going to assume that, let's say a shift is 8 hours, so they have to crew change. That's the thing that I kind of gleaned offline, is they're very strict about the hours that people work. So you might stop kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there's a van that's taking the new crew and taking the old crew back. But every time you stop in a yard, for me, that's just, that's just a point where you have to be very aware of what's going on. They might be refueling. So things seem to be going like 250 to 300 mile increments throughout whatever journey we're taking.
Okay. And once you get there, what's your camp looking like? Are you doing like a tarp, a tent, shower curtain, like shelter? Are you finding an abandoned building or just winging it and sleeping out?
That's actually a great question because, it's funny. When I first joined Vagabond, I was kind of labeled as a poser because I don't fit the stereotype. It's like this clean-cut, more of an athletic type guy, well-spoken. Again, not to toot my own horn or whatever, but I just didn't fit, and it kind of took me a while to gain acceptance. Which maybe that's the right thing to do. You kind of have to prove yourself. So, anyways, for me, I kind of do more unconventional. I don't use tents. I'm not, trying to stay at shelters. I'm not building up a campsite. I'm not having a heavy presence. I'm absolutely mobile. I've got this 70-liter backpack that I've been living out of, and I just sleep out in the open in general. If the elements are hitting, like right now it's raining, I'm under this cover. I'm under a cover of a local business that doesn't have people because it's not active right now. People are home enjoying whatever, and I take advantage. So my buddy has given me access, thankfully, to his Xfinity internet provider hotspots, and I kind of roam around and see where I can get. But my strategy, and I'm glad I started road tripping because I think this is a great progression. If you want to get into this lifestyle, you should start with something like a car or a van because now you're guaranteed a nice sleeping spot. You're mobile. There's many more options at your disposal. And I got a sense that, stuff like parks, businesses, business parks, nature areas, outskirts of town, suburbs, abandoned buildings, things of that nature really work out. But truthfully, anything works out because if you're there when things are closed, nobody's going to see you. So as long as you get out before people come in, you can essentially sleep anywhere, and that opens up a whole host of options for you. At this point, for me, a park just outside of a park has worked out. There's kind of this nature trail, and there's a nook on the side. I'm still exposed, I'm still open, but being almost 2 years in, there's a sense of confidence, understanding what works and what's not. And as long as something works, stick with it. And I'm here kind of out in the open, laying in a sleeping bag on the concrete, which is funny because I'm comfortable there. Growing up, we were real poor, and sleeping on the ground was completely normal, and I actually liked the feeling. So I sleep directly on concrete in my sleeping bag, and some purists always call me out on the fact, where's the cardboard, where's this? I'm like, I'm fucking comfortable. Why do I need to drag the shit around if I don't need to? So that's what I'm doing at this point. If things get rainy, I'm here at this business, which is covered. It's got access to Wi-Fi. I'm good here. Worst case scenario, there's a park right there that's got covered, sheltered areas, which I can sleep in. My biggest advice to people is just be respectful of the people you deal with, people you come across. Have a smile, laugh, and you'll be surprised at how disarming that is and how much you can, quote-unquote, get away with. So really, attitude goes a long way. I've been through dozens and dozens of law enforcement encounters. All of them have gone well. Just because I'm very quick to address, I'm sorry, I'll get out of here, you're not going to see me again. And sometimes people even law enforcement will turn the other cheek and be like, I didn't even see you. So that really is my biggest piece of advice. You can sleep in a lot more places than you think. Just have a good attitude.
Yeah, I generally agree. I mean, if you're gonna be a dick when they come, then they're probably gonna reciprocate the sentiment, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's some good advice there. Yeah, I've done my fair amount of sleeping on the floor and on the concrete. I feel like after a while, once you get used to it, you kind of settle into it in a weird way. Either your muscles get tougher or they get softer, but one way or another, they work themselves out.
It's amazing how much humans can adapt. We put such a limiting factor on ourselves. I think because of the comfort of society, technology, and whatnot, we don't realize how much things we're capable of. And going through tough shit, a lot more of us can definitely go through that. And nothing's going to expose you to that like being a vagabond. So I'm glad because these are life lessons you can take into anything. If you think about it, we've got a superpower. We're able to operate in more environments than the average person by far. And that's something I'm going to take to heart for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. So whereabouts are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
So I've been in Seattle since mid-April. Yeah, so I'm Pacific Northwest. It's starting to get rainy, and when I mentioned, being relocating down to Oregon, which is still rainy, but I'm going to have access to better stuff. Being around my best friend, and it's just kind of a general rule of thumb. You want to be south during the cold seasons, north during it's warm. I've actually totally bastardized that, and I've spent the last 2 winters in the Midwest, around the Great Lakes, which is the most brutal area in the U.S., probably overall, I would say. Tough cities, Detroit, Chicago, just blue collar, tough, unforgiving. But yeah, I'm in Seattle, and I openly advertise that. Why? Because I want people to reach out. That experience with the young couple that I took on that recent train hop from Seattle to Spokane was amazing, and I want to do that more and more.
Right on. Are you open to any other rides besides the intermodals, or are you strictly intermodal?
Great question. At this point, I think I'm going to stick to intermodals. I just don't see the appeal of anything else because being a content creator, filming and stuff, it lends itself to much better opportunities, much better views, you're more comfortable. And I'm getting to major cities which have better access to abandoned buildings because that's something very much so that I want to continue documenting.
Okay. When you say documenting, what sort of stuff are you doing? Are you more documenting your experience trying to camp out, or is it the building itself and I don't know what its potential history might be or what you find? Like, is it more urban exploring or is it more like camping out?
Oh, for me, it's purely urban exploring. And truthfully, I'm not into the history of stuff. There's YouTube channels that more so specialize in that. And the person doesn't even have to go into that building. They can just pull up pictures of it and kind of discuss through the process of that building and what it means. What I'm trying to create is a POV experience, usually at night. That's why I want to be unique. I believe that the best way to go about it for me is to be niche. And the niche, for me, is being alone at night, which is a rare, more unique perspective. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just trying to provide that. And there's something about being in the dark, alone, in a massive space that is just appealing. It makes me live. It makes me feel alive. I believe it, for me, I describe it as a thrilling calm. And I've done places, that are not portrayed on YouTube, stuff like, a huge military medical campus in Pittsburgh and things of that nature. And even if buildings have been documented, being alone in the dark, seeing that in POV, putting yourself in that place is just, it's amazing. I kind of liken it, and a lot of people mention this, it's like a horror movie vibe. It's like so many people enjoy horror movies, so I tell them, put yourself in my shoes and imagine yourself walking through these spaces. I'm walking through an abandoned tuberculosis clinic, through an abandoned mall, through an abandoned factory, stuff like that. There's an intrigue in kind of this urban decay, so to speak, and I'm trying to bring kind of the most visceral experience possible.
Would you say that your I don't know, like the horror movie aspect of it, is that you kind of trying to entertain yourself in the situation, or is it that it's a genuine fear? You know what I mean? Because I've been through a fair amount of abandoned buildings, and sometimes it's almost like it makes it more exciting sometimes if you think to yourself that, oh, like what could happen if I open this door or whatnot.
That's awesome, yeah. It's funny because I hate horror movies. They're like the least. Horror movies and westerns are like the lowest tier of movies. But yet people compare my content to horror movies. I'm like, this is really weird. It's a paradox. And part of the intrigue, like you mentioned, is the unknown. And that's what the darkness brings. We fear it because we don't know. And it's funny because I tell people you can, I guess in a way there's a genetic predisposition. I'm afraid of, let's say, I'm afraid of huge crowds. You're afraid of the dark. So we all have these kind of fears, but I embrace that as something I'm comfortable in. And like you were saying, your mind kind of goes, oh, is there like a freaking ski mask killer behind that door? Is there this? Is there that? And that is part of the excitement of being an adrenaline junkie. These are kind of adrenaline things. Train hopping, exploring abandoned buildings, especially at night alone, has those characteristics. So absolutely for me, that's why I always say it's a thrilling calm. I'm absolutely calm. I feel comfortable. I've slept in these places. But there's always that part of you that's going to be like, what might happen?
I actually have a pretty wild story with an abandoned building. One time I was going through this abandoned train station and I do a bit of like graffiti and street art, so I was ripping through this abandoned building. No one's been in there for ages. It had an asbestos don't enter sign, but if you don't disturb it, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I was going through spray painting and I was looking around just seeing what I could find, and it looked kind of like someone lived there, but they kept the house clean, if you will. And I found this tunnel, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave my spray cans all here on this table, like all my paints, and I'm gonna go down in this tunnel, explore a bit, and then come back up and continue what I'm doing. And then I went down maybe like 30 minutes, and by the time I came back up, someone had cleaned up all of the spray cans that I left, put them away in drawers and like lockers and stuff around the train yard. So there was someone in there while I was there, and they just knew the place way better than I did, and I never saw that person.
Wow.
I saw their jacket
Yeah,
though. I saw their jacket hanging, and then maybe like a week or two later, I saw a dude wearing the same jacket, maybe like 100 or 200 meters away, and he was he was yelling at a tree, and like hitting it with a stick and talking to it. So he must have worked for the city or something like that. Um, but yeah, it was just a wild experience.
yeah, that's something else. And that, see, these, when I tell people, like, I don't know if I should call them normal or whatever, let's just, for the sake of a better term, call them normies. People who are not in this lifestyle, the vast majority of people. But they're never going to understand kind of like the intrigue behind all of that and seeing stuff. And I tell people at this point, I'm not shocked by anything. Like, that story is hilarious. It's funny. Thanks for sharing. It's awesome. But it doesn't surprise me. Like, I would just be throwing my hands in the air, kind of laughing and being like, okay, what in the world?
Oh yeah, I wasn't really in like shock or anything. It was just like a funny experience to have.
Exactly. So I've done probably 30 massive. I only do massive dumb buildings. Why? Because I need to spend an hour or two in a place to feel like it's worth it. Especially since I film. I'm a filmer, so I need to have that time to kind of, create content and stuff like that. Um, I've also what I do is I called it stealth series. So besides abandoned buildings, the way to kind of, expand the possible places you see is to do places like construction sites. So I call it stealth series because they are active sites. So anytime I see a construction site, big site, skyscrapers, massive building, offices, whatever, I'm like, okay, I can explore that. I'll call it stealth series. So kind of an expansion of that was I went to this in Cincinnati. I think it's Forest Fair Mall, and it's essentially abandoned. There's only one place open, an arcade. And I was road tripping around the area, took a detour, and I walked in. And right when I walked in, something came to mind. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try to stay after hours. And I'm going around this place, and there's nothing there but an arcade. In one corner, I found this former restaurant, which was obviously abandoned.
Okay.
And I'm just going through it, thinking, where can I stay? Well, they had like a meat locker. It's not active. There's no power to it. And they close at 6:30. So around 2 o'clock, I put myself in this meat locker. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay after hours to see what I can do.
Okay.
Well, it ended up being 3.5 hours. Around 9:30 p.m., I hear no noises, and I come out. Now, since being there, since I went even before the meat locker, I'd kind of done a tour of potential escape routes. In the back, there was a door. And then there's like another door, main doors of the second floor of the mall nearby. So I'm like, worst case scenario, I can easily run out. And I told myself, like, there's so many security cameras that I knew I was going to get caught. But that's part of the thrill. Again, adrenaline junkie, I know I'm going to get caught. It's like, Sham, how long would last in this place before somebody comes after you? Well, I'm going out there, barely go out, like 5 minutes in, and then all of a sudden I see this bike come towards me, and it's a security guard biking towards me. I'm like, oh shit. So I run back to the restaurant, and I'm going to the back door, which I think is unlocked, but I didn't take a very good look, previously. And I run into this door and bounce back. Well, it's been padlocked shut. So I'm like, oh shit, I have to come back out to the main area. Security guard's there with his bike. He's yelling at me. I go past him, and my second option is the main doors of the second floor. I run through them, go into the second set. Just as I'm hitting them, again, I bounce back. I didn't realize they'd been chain linked from the outside. So now I have to come back out into the main mall area, and the security guard's yelling at me. He's on his phone, like, describing my descriptions, I'm assuming, to the local police. Go past him. At this point, okay, I'm on the second floor. I have to try the first floor. So I'm going down the escalators, and I kind of have a laugh because this dude's trying to, like, take his bike down the escalators. It was a complete epic fail. He's like totally failing to go down escalators with a bike,
Is he mounted on the bike or holding it?
No, he's trying to hold it, but like the width of him and the bike are not fitting through very well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a funny scene as I'm panicking, and it's a good lesson, I guess, overall in the vagabond lifestyle if you're going to explore. And again, we're doing illegal stuff. I mean, just by urban camping, you're breaking rules. So I'm not going to get into the morality of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't really say there's anything morally wrong there. You're just kind of doing your thing. And that concludes episode 14 of the Moonbase podcast. I hope you guys stay tuned for part 2 where we continue the discussion. And we had a bit of technical issues, a little disconnection, but the story continues in the next episode. So stay tuned and enjoy.